What if I told you that some of the biggest boxing champions who once made millions now live surprisingly simple lives? From champions who lost everything to fighters who chose to live humbly, here are 20 boxers that live like they are poor. 1. Mike Tyson. If you ever heard of boxing, you're familiar with Mike Tyson. One of the all-time greatest fighter intimidators, he knocked dudes out in round 1 like they were nothing. He was only 20 when he became the youngest heavyweight title holder in boxing history. On top of the game, one of the best-known athletes on the globe at his best, and with his fame came more than a god-awful amount of dough. Mike Tyson had earned more than $400 million from boxing and endorsements at one time. Rather than saving it, however, he spent it like there was no tomorrow. He purchased mansions, expensive cars, jewelry, and even pet tigers. Yes, actual tigers. He claimed to have spent $70,000 annually to feed them. Tyson enjoyed partying as well, and his life was dotted with costly vices. He was said to have spent millions on automobiles, clocks, and over-the-top gifts for friends and strangers alike. Mike Tyson was utterly broke by 2003. He needed to declare bankruptcy despite earning more money than anyone could ever imagine. A mix of poor investment choices, court cases, and excessive spending left him with a mere fraction of what he had started with. Nowadays, Mike Tyson leads a much more subdued life than in his youth. He no longer squanders money on tigers or wild parties. Rather, he is devoted to his marijuana business, which has been a surprising success. He also has a podcast, Hot Boxin' with Mike Tyson, where he discusses life, boxing, and what he has learned from his errors. 2. Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao is a boxing legend. He is the only fighter in history to have won world championships in 8 weight divisions, which is unprecedented. His work ethic, power, and speed made him one of the greatest fighters of all time. He didn't win fights. He dominated them. Pacquiao grew up in abject poverty in the Philippines. As a kid, he could not even eat and was forced out of school to assist his family in surviving. He began boxing in his teenage years, dreaming of earning enough money to purchase food and take care of his mother. Jump ahead a few years, and Pacquiao was among the world's highest-paid athletes. He earned hundreds of millions of dollars in the ring and from endorsements, from boxing superstars such as Floyd Mayweather and Oscar de la Hoya. Unlike most wealthy athletes, Manny Pacquiao never lost sight of his humble beginnings. Despite earning millions, he continues to live an uncomplicated life and donates the majority of his wealth. He's famous for donating enormous sums of his earnings to poor families in the Philippines. He's constructed homes, schools, hospitals, and even covered food and medical expenses for thousands. Pacquiao never became addicted to extravagance. He does not have 100 sports cars or host crazy parties. Instead, he is with his family and still helps others. After his professional boxing career, Pacquiao ventured into politics in the Philippines. He became a senator and even ran for president. He is usually dressed in plain clothes and mingling with ordinary people as if he were not among the wealthiest sportsmen in the nation. Even though he has the money to spend his life on luxuries, he does not do so. He feels that with his money, he can help people and do something worthwhile and not boast. That is the reason he stands among the greatest and humblest boxers ever. 3. Floyd Mayweather Jr. We all know Floyd Mayweather Jr., the undefeated champion who earned well over $1 billion throughout his boxing career. He is famous for his gaudy lifestyle, fancy jewelry, luxury vehicles, and personal aircraft. But Floyd Mayweather Sr., his father, is the exact opposite. Mayweather Sr. was a good boxer himself. He boxed professionally in the 1970s and 1980s and was a good welterweight during his career. But he never earned huge paychecks like his son. His biggest bout was against Sugar Ray Leonard, a legendary boxer. He lost but still gave him a good contest. Since he never achieved the same kind of fame and success as his son, his income was never nearly as high. Rather than residing in mansions or purchasing luxury items, he has led a much more modest existence. Even though his son is among the wealthiest athletes in the world, Mayweather Sr. has never lived an extravagant lifestyle. He's famous for dressing in plain clothes, driving ordinary cars, and maintaining a low profile. Rather than attempting to live lavishly, he has been dedicated to training and coaching fighters. He has been a boxing trainer for years, training some of the sport's best fighters. But he has never attempted to emulate his son's lifestyle. 4. Evander Holyfield. Evander Holyfield is one of the greatest boxers in history. He was a 4-time heavyweight champion and became most famous for his bouts against Mike Tyson, notably the well-known bout when Tyson bit his ear. He earned more than $250 million during his career, but not even all of that money saved him from landing in deep financial trouble. So, what became of Holyfield's wealth? As is the case with many athletes, he made poor financial choices. He invested in companies that didn't work, spent millions on homes, automobiles, and fine things, and paid for several legal fights. Child support was one of his largest financial obligations. Holyfield has 11 children with various women, and the expense of supporting them placed a huge burden on his bank account. Holyfield used to own an amazing 109-room house in Atlanta that was one of the biggest in Georgia. However, he was unable to match the expenses, and the mansion was repossessed and sold at auction. He was so broke at one point that he even began selling his vintage boxing memorabilia. He auctioned championship belts, fight robes, and even the gloves he used in some of his most memorable fights, just to have some money. Holyfield now leads a much simpler life. He continues to work as a boxing trainer and attends events, but he no longer has the luxury lifestyle that he used to enjoy. After winning $250 million, he lost most of it. Now, he must be much more prudent with his finances. 5. James Buster Douglas. James Buster Douglas is well known for one thing: defeating Mike Tyson in 1990. Tyson was thought to be invincible at the time. Nobody believed Douglas had a shot, but he had one of the greatest upsets in boxing history by knocking Tyson out in the 10th round. You would think that after Tyson was defeated, Douglas would have been an international superstar. But things never worked out. He lost his next fight to Evander Holyfield, and afterwards, his career never hit its previous levels. Unlike some of the other heavyweight champions, he never had gigantic endorsement contracts or sustained ring success. Although he earned decent cash during his heyday years, he did not succeed in retaining it. Unlike Tyson, Holyfield, or Mayweather, Douglas never enjoyed enormous long-term paydays. Once he retired, Douglas faded from the limelight. He never lived like a rich superstar, despite having achieved one of the greatest victories in the history of boxing. Rather than purchasing mansions or luxury cars, he lived modestly. Today, Buster Douglas trains and coaches boxers, teaching them what he knows. He doesn't enjoy luxury, and he never attempted to flaunt wealth like other former champions. Although he defeated Tyson in one of the biggest bouts ever, he never emerged as a millionaire celebrity like some others of his time. 6. Riddick Bowe. At his best, Riddick Bowe was the world's top heavyweight. He won the title of undisputed heavyweight champion in the early 1990s and was famous for his big shots and thrilling bouts. His greatest victory came in 1992 when he beat Evander Holyfield to become the champion. Bowe earned more than $100 million as a boxer. He was blessed with all the talent in the world. But outside the ring, he wasn't so lucky. Poor financial choices, irresponsible spending, and legal issues quickly depleted his wealth. One of his worst moments was in 1996 when he kidnapped his children and wife in an unsuccessful attempt to keep them with him. This resulted in his being incarcerated for 17 months. Legal proceedings drained him of a lot of money, and he was never financially stable again. Now, Bowe lives a much different life. Rather than living in a mansion house, he rents a smaller house and no longer enjoys the luxuries that he used to. He makes the occasional appearance at boxing events, but he's not living like a multimillionaire anymore. His tale is a perfect case of how bad money decisions can erase even the largest of boxing fortunes. 7. Marvin Hagler. Unlike some of the fighters who lost their fortune through poor judgment, Marvin Hagler decided to live modestly. He wasn't any ordinary boxer. He was one of the best middleweight champions in history. Hagler ruled the 1980s, having epic battles with Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas Hearns, and Roberto Duran. Hagler was not like other combatants. He didn't throw his money into showy vehicles and flashy rings. Rather, he invested intelligently and preserved his money. What set him apart, though, was the fact that he just left the sport after his retirement. Following his unpopular defeat to Sugar Ray Leonard in 1987, Hagler never boxed again. Instead, he left with his bags and relocated to Italy, where he enjoyed a serene private life. He even ventured into acting, appearing in some Italian action films. In contrast to other retired boxers, he didn't seek the limelight or attempt to remain relevant. He lived away from the boxing fraternity, leading a humble and serene existence. Hagler wasn't impoverished, but he never lived like one who had earned millions of dollars. He always opted for tranquility instead of celebrity and never boasted about his riches. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2021, yet his tale is still a lesson for a boxer who made intelligent decisions and lived life according to his dictate. 8. Antonio Tarver. Antonio Tarver was one of the best light heavyweight boxers, most notably for his battles with Roy Jones Jr. and his appearance in the film Rocky Balboa. He enjoyed a successful career, capturing world titles and establishing himself as a prominent figure. Tarver earned millions of dollars, but as with most boxers, financial difficulties ensued. He was arrested in 2012 for not paying gambling bills, but that was only the beginning. Tarver had child support and tax issues that ate away at his fortune. Although he was at one time one of the world's best fighters, Tarver has been forced to do lower-paying jobs just to get by. He's been a boxing commentator and trainer, but he doesn't live the lavish lifestyle that some of the former champs enjoy. He even attempted to get back into boxing in his late 40s just to make a little money. Unfortunately, he never saw another large payday, and he is still far from his millionaire days. 9. Leon Spinks. Leon Spinks became the first boxer ever to win a world title when he beat Muhammad Ali in 1978. Spinks was only 24 and had just 7 professional bouts when he stunned the world by stripping Ali of his heavyweight crown. The victory should have made him a rich man for life. But fate had other plans. Spinks earned a lot of money in boxing, but he never quite achieved the kind of financial success that other champions enjoyed. Following the loss in the rematch against Ali, his career declined. He continued fighting for years, but the huge paychecks did not come again. Worse still, Spinks did not handle his finances well. He overspent, invested poorly, and had run-ins with the law. Unlike other past champions who went into broadcasting or coaching, Spinks was struggling to survive. Following his retirement from boxing, Spinks was forced to hold down conventional jobs to earn a living. He worked low-grade jobs such as cleaning as a janitor at a YMCA and acting as a security guard. It was a gigantic drop from the man who beat the best boxer of all time. Spinks never griped about his hardships. He remained upbeat and lived a humble, low-key existence until his demise in 2021. 10. Pernell Whitaker. Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker was probably the greatest defensive brawler to ever fight. He held 4 world titles at different weights and was famous for his smooth, elusive style that made him impossible to hit. He battled idols such as Julio Cesar Chavez and Oscar de la Hoya and earned a fortune in the process. Whitaker's boxing skill earned him gigantic paychecks, but his funds did not stick around. Similar to other fighters, he did not have any financial acumen. He spent a lot of his wealth through poor investments, legal problems, and personal issues. His greatest disappointment was when he had to sell his title belts just to settle debts. It was a painful experience for a fighter who had struggled so hard to win those titles. At the time of his demise in 2019, Whitaker was not the rich star he had been. He lived a humble life, keeping out of the limelight. Unlike some past champions who continued to boast about their riches, Whitaker kept things under wraps, hardly ever flaunting or boasting about money. Even with his financial issues, he was still a figure to be respected in the sport of boxing. He trained fighters, sharing his experience with the new generation of pugilists. 11. Vinny Pazienza. Vinny Pazienza, more commonly referred to as Vinny Paz, possessed one of the greatest comeback tales in boxing. He was a two-division world champion and battled some of the hardest names in the sport. However, what established him as famous wasn't the fact that he won. Instead, it was his incredible comeback from a nearly fatal injury. In 1991, Pazienza was involved in a terrible car crash that fractured his neck. The doctors informed him that he would never box again. Most individuals in his situation would have quit, but Pazienza did not. He defied medical orders and continued training with a metal plate screwed into his head. A year later, he pulled off a miraculous comeback and claimed another world title. His life was so inspiring that it was adapted into the 2016 film Bleed for This, featuring Miles Teller. Although successful, Pazienza never lived the life of a wealthy superstar. Contrary to other fighters who blew their wealth on lavish homes and fancy automobiles, Paz preferred an unpretentious existence. He kept his interest in boxing foremost and never fell victim to the glamorous life that destroyed so many other boxers. He was a hard-working, no-nonsense individual who did not spend money on things he did not need. Even though he earned millions in the ring, he never allowed fame to alter his nature. 12. George Foreman. Before he was the grill guy, George Foreman was a reigning heavyweight champion. He took home a gold medal at the 1968 Olympics and then went on to become the world heavyweight champion when he knocked out Joe Frazier in 1973. Foreman was a force to be reckoned with, and his aggressive fighting style made him one of the most feared fighters of his time. Following his stunning defeat to Muhammad Ali in the historic Rumble in the Jungle bout in 1974, Foreman's career declined. By 1977, he had retired from boxing and turned to religious work. There was one huge issue, though: he was broke. Foreman had made millions, but poor investments and lavish spending left him almost penniless. He could hardly provide for his family and was in a financial crisis. With no regular income, times became difficult for the former champion. To earn a living, Foreman had a shocking return to boxing during the late 1980s. Contrary to his earlier years, he now boxed with a more measured and intelligent style. In defiance of odds, he regained the heavyweight championship once more at age 45, becoming the oldest heavyweight champion in history. Even after earning millions in his return, Foreman did not go back to extravagant spending. He maintained a simple lifestyle, prioritizing taking care of his family rather than purchasing mansions and luxury vehicles. Foreman's actual financial success wasn't derived from boxing. It was derived from a kitchen device. He signed on to promote a fat-reducing grill, which would later become the George Foreman Grill. The product took off globally, raking in hundreds of millions of dollars. Even though Foreman became very wealthy later in life, he never lost his humility. He's the quintessential example of a fighter who was once broke but made the right decisions to change his fate. 13. Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes is sometimes underappreciated, but he was among the greatest heavyweight champions in the history of boxing. He ruled the division during the late 1970s and early 1980s, holding the WBC and IBF heavyweight titles for several years. Holmes even provided Muhammad Ali with his final professional loss in 1980. Unlike most boxers who squandered their fortunes, Holmes was always frugal with his money. Even during the peak of his career, when he was earning millions per bout, he never lived a lavish lifestyle. He didn't purchase dozens of luxury cars, didn't host wild parties, and didn't spend money on things he didn't require. Holmes once stated, "I don't live like a superstar, I live like a regular guy." While other boxers were spending their wealth, Holmes was diversifying into real estate and business ventures. He knew that boxing was not going to last forever, so he ensured that his future was secure. Even now, Holmes does not show off his wealth. He is worth millions, but he continues to reside in his hometown of Easton, Pennsylvania, in a humble house relative to other successful athletes. He owns a couple of small enterprises, such as a restaurant, and leads a peaceful, comfortable life without extravagance. 14. Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson was a trailblazer in boxing. In 1908, he became the first black heavyweight champion, an historic moment in an era where racism ran deeply through society. Johnson was a formidable boxer who was skilled in defense and capable of outsmarting his rivals in the ring. Johnson didn't merely make history inside the ring, he also lived his life his way. He adored high-speed cars, fine clothes, and luxury. He traveled extensively around the globe, spent his money lavishly, and cared little about what other people said. But his decadent lifestyle finally caught up with him. He earned a lot of money through his boxing career, but he spent even more. Rather than saving or investing prudently, he spent his fortune on gambling, expensive cars, and parties. With time, money became a serious concern. Boxing was not paying as it once did, and with no savings, he was in difficult conditions. He even had to fight small bouts just to survive. Even though he was one of the greatest boxing pioneers, Johnson spent his latter years in poverty. 15. Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston was also one of the most intimidating heavyweight champions of all time. He controlled the ring with his crushing blows and knocked out Floyd Patterson in the first round to claim the world title in 1962. He was considered unbeatable by many, until he encountered young Muhammad Ali, who stole his title in 1964. Even though he was a world champion, Liston never quite got to keep his money. His finances were in the hands of crooked managers, and most people think he was involved with criminal syndicates that exploited him. He earned millions, but it all vanished before it even had a chance to end up in his pockets. Even at the pinnacle of his stardom, Liston remained in harsh environments, barely eking out an existence. He didn't keep ostentatious mansions and high-cost automobiles like most champions. Instead, he was leading a meager, typically tenuous lifestyle. Liston's career waned after his defeats to Ali, and he spent the remainder of his years accepting small bouts for cash. His 1970 demise is still shrouded in mystery, with some supposing he was assassinated because of his associations with the underworld. Tragically, even though one of the greatest heavyweights to ever step into the ring, he never achieved financial success. 16. Rocky Lockridge. Rocky Lockridge was a tough and powerful boxer who won the WBA Super Featherweight Championship in 1984. He became famous for knocking out Roger Mayweather, Floyd Mayweather's uncle, in the first round, showing that he was a force to be reckoned with in the ring. Similar to most boxers, Lockridge earned a lot of money while he was fighting, but he made some poor financial decisions, and personal issues took it all away. Once his boxing career ended, he got into addiction, which caused him to lose it all, including his house. Lockridge spent several years homeless on the streets and fighting addiction. He went from being a world champion to having nothing. Lockridge's life took a drastic turn when his tearful meltdown during a family intervention was captured in a viral video that gained public sympathy. Desperate fans rallied behind him, and he was eventually able to seek the help that he needed. While he never regained wealth, Lockridge also turned his life around, adopting a peaceful life and living modestly before his demise in 2019. 17. Gerald McClellan. Gerald McClellan was perhaps the toughest middleweight puncher of all time. He won the WBO and WBC middleweight belts, knocking out foes in annihilating fashion. He was the bright new star who was to dominate boxing for many years to come. In 1995, McClellan fought Nigel Benn in what was to be another of his huge victories. It turned out to be one of the most heartbreaking bouts in the history of boxing. After being hit with some hard shots, McClellan fell to the canvas and suffered a catastrophic brain injury. He lived, but the injury was irreversible. He became blind, largely deaf, and unable to look after himself. Now a champion earning millions, McClellan's career was brought to an end in a second. He needed 24-hour care, solely dependent on his family for aid. Rather than residing in wealth, he now spends his days in a humble, peaceful residence, far removed from the stage where he previously flourished. 18. Iran Barkley. Iran Barkley was a world champion in 3 divisions, remembered for his legendary toughness and capability to knock out legends. He famously knocked out Thomas Hitman Hearns in 1988, sending the boxing world into shock and demonstrating he was a force to be reckoned with. Though earning millions during his career, Barkley ended up in financial insolvency. His bad investments, poor financial planning, and hefty training camp expenditures depleted his finances. Unlike most fighters who made their money wisely, Barkley never had any financial cushioning. Things became so bad that there was a time when Barkley was homeless, sleeping on someone's couch and barely getting by. It is a sad existence for a person who once reached the pinnacle of the boxing universe. Barkley's status has changed marginally, yet he still enjoys a modest, no-frills existence. He doesn't own the riches that most would imagine for a previous champion. 19. James Buddy McGirt. James Buddy McGirt was a very talented boxer and went on to become a successful boxing coach. He won world titles in 2 divisions by beating some of the greatest fighters in his era. While most fighters squander their wealth, McGirt never did that. He was never the kind of guy who would purchase flashy vehicles, lavish jewelry, or enormous mansions. Rather, he liked to keep his lifestyle simple and low-key. Even at the height of his career, McGirt never splurged on money. He knew that boxing money doesn't last forever, so he lived within his means. When McGirt retired, he became a successful trainer and trained some of the top boxers in the world, including Arturo Gatti and Sergey Kovalev. He still doesn't live lavishly, showing that some boxers don't require expensive things to be content. 20. Frank Bruno. Frank Bruno is one of the greatest British boxers of all time. He was famous for his devastating punches, charismatic personality, and legendary fights in the ring. In 1995, he became the WBC heavyweight champion, making history and establishing his legacy. Bruno earned millions throughout his career, but as with many boxers, he experienced financial difficulties after hanging up his gloves. But his challenges weren't purely financial. There were mental health issues that made life all the more difficult. His ailments resulted in hospital stays and a difficult time where he struggled to stay afloat financially. Without the steady stream of boxing payday checks, he lived a much quieter, less complicated life than fans anticipated. Although Bruno does not live in splendor, he is still one of the best respected and most beloved in British boxing. He openly shares his battles with others, urging them to keep their minds at peace and pockets full.